Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Joining me today is Austin Hattox to talk about websites and branding. Austin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. I'm excited to be here.
So for listeners who are hearing you for the first time, can you tell me your superhero origin story? How did you get started working with nonprofits?
Totally. Yeah, so my origin story is that I grew up in a very rural town in Texas with a population of 600 people. And that was good in a lot of respects, but it was also very much its own world. Like, I used to joke that I didn't know how to introduce myself to new people until I was 18 when I moved away, because I literally knew everybody in town. It was really like this muscle that I just never got to exercise. And so fast forward a couple years, I go to college in the big city. And once there, I start volunteering with a local nonprofit that worked to provide experiences and opportunities for an orphanage in Mexico. And at that point, I didn't even know what the word nonprofit meant. It was just something that kind of sounded like it was interesting to do. And I think I also liked the people a lot. So I kind of wanted to be cool like them. But it was one of those things that was like so far outside of my experience growing up that, I'd just never been exposed to the realities of these kind of hardships in the world. And what this community that we worked with, like what they were experiencing, was like so far out of left field for me. And it made me realize that I had been living in this bubble for so long, and I really lacked perspective on our world, like how things worked, and just like the other experiences that were not my own. And it made me realize that there were all these other things that were happening around me that I had no clue about. And it was like a very interesting experience because you could help somebody and you could see the difference that you made and like have this human connection that I just didn't know was possible, really. And it was one of those things, like it really shook me at the time, and it's really stayed with me ever since. But after that, I graduated to move away, stopped working with that nonprofit, and I worked in the for-profit space for about a decade as a software developer. But I always had a few small nonprofits that I worked with on the side with their websites. Fast forward a couple more years, COVID occurs, everybody goes online, nonprofits included, and nonprofits in particular needed a lot of help with that transition. So they started to not see their website so much as just something that they have, but it needed to be something that they could leverage to actually grow their organization and reach people. And so I started taking on more nonprofit clients and doing pro bono consulting. I'd also started to get a little burned out, working on projects, and that essentially amounted to getting people to buy more widgets. And I also really liked the idea of being able to contribute to organizations that existed entirely to solve the problems, in the world about things that I often had no clue about. Before long, me and my wife put our heads together and we formed a web agency called Pixel Lighthouse. And at Pixel Lighthouse, we help small nonprofit teams build brands and websites that take your visitors on a journey. And unlike other web agencies, our process is we operate very tightly. Me and my wife and our contractors work very closely, where all the pieces of your website work together as a single unit. So there's no silos. The design informs the content, which informs the features that we incorporate on the website. And it really comes together to form a sort of system, like an experience for your community that represents your organization well and also gets visitors taking action when they come to the site.
Yeah, I've been to your website multiple times, and there's something very special about it. It's very attractive. It's clean, and it's rare, I find these days, to find that, especially in the nonprofit space where it seems to be more about content and putting things together as quickly as possible without any kind of concept of a design element. So I understand then that the need you were trying to solve in creating Pixel Lighthouse was because you felt that nonprofits really needed that extra help, that push to level up their digital presence. And what exactly? Can you maybe fill in the gaps? End my sentence, if you would.
Totally, yeah. I think like the first, the core issue that I kept encountering again and again is that I would visit these nonprofit websites and would constantly be left scratching my head, essentially. Like, at this point, I've looked at hundreds of nonprofit websites, and I still come across organizations that I can't make heads or tails about what they do. And I consider myself to be reasonably intelligent. And, if I'm struggling with figuring out this organization, I thought, like there has to be so many others that are just like me, because understanding what a nonprofit does is really the core of their elevator pitch. And you can't expect somebody to care about your cause if they don't even understand the basics of your mission. And so it was one of those things that first time it happens, you're like, okay, maybe this was just that organization. But it's like you said, it was kind of a pattern. It kept happening again and again. And the need, I think, became very clear for having this layer of clarity with nonprofit websites that just seemed to always be out of grasp. But, after we started talking with more nonprofits, we started to notice there were other common issues that cropped up again and again. And the website as a whole was sort of like this really big source of frustration for the organization's team. And, what we found is that even if a nonprofit's website looked great on the outside, they frequently couldn't make simple changes to their content due to the way that the website was originally built. And, that's something that is everywhere. It was something we saw in the for-profit space, but it seemed to be much more common with nonprofits. And I think that was kind of like the canary in the coal mine moment, where there's just so many downstream issues that emerge from not being able to fully control your website. You have your confusing messaging, and that never gets updated because you can't make those changes. And I also kept encountering nonprofits who would say that they had to work around their website, instead of alongside it, because they knew that if they were sending visitors to their website, it wouldn't actually bring people closer to their cause. It would just they would bounce off, they'd get confused. And it's one of those problems that compounds over time. And it made me realize that there was a really big need there, especially with like the central role that websites play in an organization's marketing. And seemed like a high leverage area that we could approach and like be able to fix to really enable organizations to be able to reach more people and do more good in the world.
I've noticed that I have the impression, let's say, that most nonprofits tend to build their own websites using internal staff that may not be very technically advanced, or might be even a volunteer working at the organization. Have you noticed that trend as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, it contributes to the problem. So it's like organizations try to take on all of this stuff internally. And, if you have the skill set internally, then you can make that work. But what I think a lot of nonprofits don't realize is that there's just so many pieces and so many decisions that go into your website, like the messaging, and then there's the design, and then there's the platform itself, that you need to kind of approach it in a particular way to make sure that all those pieces work as one.
Before we go further into the details of some of those topics, I'm curious to know how you came up with the name Pixel Lighthouse. Where did that come from?
That's a good question. Yeah, we get that one a lot. The Pixel side, I think, is pretty obvious because we work in the digital space. I've also kind of had like a thing for pixel art. I always thought that was like a cool retro aesthetic, and we tried to carry that forward a little bit in our branding. But for the lighthouse portion, there's this quote by George Bernard Shaw that goes, "I can think of no other edifice constructed by man as altruistic as a lighthouse. They were built only to serve." And, like that kind of language like really resonated with us, because, that's what we want to do as an agency. Is we wouldn't exist without nonprofits, and we operate so that we can serve the organizations that are making real change in the world. But the meaning goes multiple ways, as you probably guessed, because it also applies to the nonprofits themselves. So nonprofits exist to serve the needs of the community, and a lighthouse is like, as a concept, just so evocative, as something that, draws in the ships to arrive at their destination. And, it's one of those things, it's like, maybe the situation is rocky, there might be monsters in the darkness, but nonprofits are there to shine a light that works as a beacon and to pull in the community and show them the way forward. That's the role that our clients serve to our communities. And that's also what we want to do, is like help nonprofits shine a little bit brighter in the darkness.
And to protect them from the waves too, I imagine, from crashing against the shore. And so it's a great visualization. I love it, actually.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the main services that you provide, because you mentioned obviously website is never just a website. There's obviously multiple layers to it. So what kind of layers do you provide in providing and building and designing a website?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, most of our work revolves around the website and kind of the things that are exterior to that. And also like the brand as it applies to your website. So someone comes to your organization's website, what do they think and feel? And then how can we shape that, according to how we want to come across as an organization? And also like identifying what is the journey that we want to take these visitors on, and what kind of actions do we want those visitors to take at the end of that journey. And so to that goal, like we have two core services, which is the strategy portion, and then we have the actual implementation. And the two build on one another. So, you start with the strategy first, and then we can move into implementation once we've done the strategy. And the strategy portion is like kind of the big idea for that is that we do a 2-hour deep dive into everything about your organization. What is the context surrounding your website and your brand? Who is your audience? And then we come up with an opportunities roadmap for your website. So, it's not just an audit, it's a little bit more than that. It's more like a blueprint for what you should start doing and stop doing on your website so that you can strengthen your brand and get visitors taking action. So that's the first part. That document, we call it the nonprofit beacon. It's designed to be completely transferable. So organizations can use it internally if they want to do things internally, or they can also use it with another vendor. They don't have to work with us unless they just want to. But if they do want to work with us, then that's when we move into implementation. And then that's where we build on the roadmap in the beacon, and then we flesh it out into an actual brand and website. And, every nonprofit website is a little bit different. There's no one size fits all. But depending on the organization's budget and desired scope, we provide branding materials as well as copywriting. We do the website design, and then also the development and the launch. And so we do kind of like the top to bottom, everything to do with your website and how can we make it effective and make sure that we're conveying your organization's brand while also helping visitors go on a journey when they come to the website.
It must be difficult for some nonprofits to help you by articulating what they want. Is there like, as part of that strategy approach, do you kind of help them by giving them certain clues or hints, or like it must be a very collaborative effort, I imagine?
Yeah, we try to make it like it's kind of a very personal interaction where we, kind of have like a virtual whiteboard that we work from, and we basically go through different questions like, what do you want your community to think about your organization? And then also like, who is your community? And we just talk about some of the words that kind of encapsulates the organization. And then using those words, that's like really the basis for, okay, how can we turn this into a design that's going to make you appear approachable or empathetic or friendly or professional, just kind of depending on whatever the organization's really trying to get at and what their internal culture is like.
The word story caught to my attention as well, because I think there's an opportunity on the website to really share a story and to have people go along this journey. So I imagine that's also very personalized and very connected to the brand.
Of course, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we do is to take the stories that they have and then make sure that they are incorporated in such a way so that it's almost kind of like a narrative within the website itself. You're presenting the big idea, and then you have this progression that's kind of like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, to make sure that you can take your visitors from, point A, where maybe they aren't so familiar with your organization and what you do, to point B, where they kind of understand the entirety of your work and they're interested and maybe ready to move forward with your organization. And also incorporating those stories as sort of like a a way to help them understand the entirety of your mission and like the type of value that the organization brings to the world.
You mentioned the strategy begins with a 2-hour workshop. I imagine that there's a certain period of time where you have to take to build the roadmap and the blueprint and this, I like this nonprofit beacon. That's a great consistency with your own brand. How long approximately would it take to do that? Like, is it about a week's time where that from start to finish, can an organization see the outcomes?
It is usually about 2 weeks from start to finish. There is like an intake questionnaire that we start with. So there's kind of 3 steps. It's the intake questionnaire that sets the stage a little bit and just gives us a little bit of fodder for the actual session so we can hit the ground running. And then we have the session itself, which is 2 hours long. And then we send over the beacon, which contains all of the recommendations and kind of the roadmap for the future website.
And then if they agree to or are interested in moving forward with the implementation phase, I imagine that's obviously significantly longer than just 2 weeks. So what is a typical period you normally see in terms of, start to finish type of time frame that it takes to build the actual website?
A safe rule of thumb, so like every website's a little bit different and it's going to depend a lot on the feature set as well as like the number of pages that the organization has. But like a good rule of thumb is usually 6 to 10 weeks, and somewhere most projects fall a little bit in the middle.
And I imagine part of the back and forth during that implementation is getting enough copy, enough text to be able to put on the website. And I've built websites way back in the day, nothing compared to what you guys are building today, but basic stuff. And I always found that it was difficult to get this kind of information from the client, that they were just so busy in their day-to-day operations, or they didn't have the linguistic talent to be able to come up with certain wording, so that the end result for my situations, unfortunately, ended up being very simple websites because there wasn't much to work with. Is there any techniques or tricks that you have to be able to draw out some more stories, some more vocabulary, or is it something you just need a few ideas, a few themes, and then you can run with it?
Yeah, my wife is the creative and the copywriter of our team. And so she's very good at being able to, take what's there and like synthesize it. So there's always like a process when you do a nonprofit redesign. I think it's sort of like spring cleaning in a way where it's like, let's dust out all the rugs. Let's, get the vacuum cleaner out and let's see what we have and then see what we can use and repurpose and adapt for, a better, brighter website. So she can take, that information and usually turn it into something that's a little bit more fleshed out, has a little bit more meat on the bones. But it also depends on what the organization wants to do internally, because some organizations want to do some of the copywriting internally so that they can, save a little bit of the budget for maybe some of the pages that aren't so central to the visitor journey. And so in that case, the job is shared a little bit, where my wife will write some of the content and some of the pages for like the main pages of the website, like the home page and the about page and the programs page and the services. But it really does depend on just the organization and what they have available, and then also what they're trying to accomplish with the stuff that they have and how much they want to take on internally with their internal staff.
And I guess part of taking that on is a transition period where once you deliver the website, they'll have to, or do they need to take over the future additions and so forth? Or is it something that you offer as a managed package, for example, to say, if you want any updates within the next X months or years, or depending how long the engagement would be, that will take care of it for you? Or is it normally you hand over the keys back to the nonprofit and they typically run? Or is it a combination of both? You offer either option?
We offer either option. So that's one major thing with our agency, is we want to make sure that you're not beholden to us. If we enjoyed working together, we would love to continue working with you and supporting your organization. But, that's a monthly fee that you may or may not want to have. And we do provide training whenever we do the handoff. So after a website launch, we make sure that the organization has the keys to the car, like you said, and knows, all the ins and outs for their website, how they can make changes to their pages and how they can do anything that they'd want to do with the website. And so if they want to have that support from the maintenance perspective, then that's fine. And we're happy to do that, but they don't have to by any means. And there are a lot of organizations that maybe already have relationships with, like a local IT vendor that helps them with the maintenance portion, or somebody internally that is, a little bit more technically inclined and are able to take on that part of the process.
Mm. So who then would be your ideal client? Obviously nonprofits, certain sizes, certain industries or focus areas.
Yeah. So what we say is that we work with small nonprofit teams. And what that usually means in terms of like the average client that we work with is somewhere between $1 million and $5 million in annual revenue. But we do work with nonprofits that are larger than that, or some that are smaller. But I think, when we say small nonprofit teams, we mean mostly like organizations who are going to give us access to the major stakeholders that are going to be, the final say in the website. So, who's going to be the main person or group that's making that final decision for what the website should be. And, the thinking being that if they have the ultimate say, then we want to work alongside that person so that we can create something that aligns with that vision for the organization. And we don't end up in the situation where it's like, we create the wrong website and we end up wasting a lot of time for the organization as well as ourselves. And then we have to start over. And so I think small nonprofit teams really encapsulates that kind of approach.
And obviously, going back to that collaboration point I mentioned earlier, there obviously has to be a back and forth and certain level of participation on the nonprofit side. What kind of ways do you set the stage or expectations do you set at the beginning to make sure that the whole project is successful? I'm assuming here we go with strategy and implementation. What do you recommend or what do you need from the nonprofit in order for them to be successful?
One thing that we do is we try to make things as simple as possible for organizations, because we do know that everybody's wearing a lot of hats, and especially with smaller teams, it's hard to find time for something like your website. It's not the most pressing factor in your week. And so we found that just having that clear communication and like setting, expectations and being very upfront with, if we are to work together, step 1, step 2, step 3, this is all that we're going to need to do in order to make sure that we can arrive on time. And so when we first start a new project, we ask for any assets that organizations have. So any images or videos or previous branding work or like messaging, marketing collateral, any of that stuff, just so that we know where we're starting from. And then after that, it becomes mostly just the ability to commit to a little bit of time so that we can keep the process moving forward, because website projects have a lot of moving parts, and it's really easy to lose that momentum if you don't keep it moving forward. Have check-in, every week or every other week, and make sure that all of the key stakeholders are aware of where things stand.
And then once the project is finished, what kind of outcomes can the nonprofit expect? Let's assume that it's not an e-commerce type of site. It's more of a, this is who we are, this is what we do. Like, do you take kind of before and after metrics of saying, here, notice how many new visitors you have, or how much longer they stay on certain pages? Is there some kind of feedback that you give them, or you can have them look for to show that their investment was worth it?
Yeah. So with the size of organizations that we work with, they come at us with all levels of digital capabilities. And a lot of our clients don't have a great starting point. So, their website may not have any analytics to begin with, and they may not have any numbers at all. So, and that's part of our role with our clients, is just, to make sure that you have the things in place to make sure that you can start measuring things on your website moving forward. But in terms of outcomes, our clients get more people taking those actions on the website. And that's a really big part of the strategy, is what we want people to do when they come. We've had clients get 10 times the service inquiries within the first week of going live. So we've had big, like very quick uplifts. We've also had organizations get a lot more traffic. That one's a little bit harder to pinpoint because traffic upticks take time, especially search engine optimization work. And the reality of it is also that whenever organizations decide to do a website redesign, a lot of times that accompanies a big marketing push right after launch. So, it's not always easy to isolate one factor, but engagement with their content goes up typically. Also, like we look at things like KPIs if they're available, like average session duration and bounce rate, just to make sure things are trending in the right way. But that's kind of like the process is what actions do we want your visitors to take when they come to the website? And then we create a website that encourages people to take those actions. And, the outcome is more people doing the things that you want them to do.
Connecting this all to technology, I'm curious to know more about behind the scenes of what technologies you use just to be able to do what you do. And then what technologies do you normally recommend for implementing websites and everything else that's connected to the website as well?
This is a gargantuan question. So
let's break it down one by one.
Okay. There's a lot of tools that we use. We use ConvertKit for our newsletter platform. We work a lot with organizations that have MailChimp and Constant Contact, but we really like ConvertKit because it has very advanced automations and just kind of like gives us more flexibility for things that we want to do with our marketing. We use ClickUp for our project management. And so that's an internal use only app, but ClickUp's really nice. It's very extensible. And it's sort of like you can make it into your own kind of platform for how you want to approach your projects. It's really easy for my wife and I and our contractors to stay organized as we're collaborating on a project. We also use a digital whiteboard app called Miro. That's Miro. Miro is really nice because it's just like a whiteboard, so we can sort of put things up, we can share a screen, and we can have discussions about different concepts. And visualizing the conversation a little bit, I think makes our meetings feel a little bit more productive because people always know, like what are we talking about and what is kind of a visual representation of that. And we also use a tool called Lucid, which is like a diagramming app, and it's really nice for just creating different flows and ideation, kind of mind mapping type of activity. And then for the actual design and the website itself, so we use Figma for all of our designs. Figma is really good for collaborating with the client, so we can share those links and they can add notes to different sections, and they can tell us if the wording over here isn't particularly what they want, or if like they're concerned with different layouts or different design elements. And then for the website itself, we work only with WordPress, so that's the platform that we use. And we try to keep our plugins pretty minimal. So we use advanced custom fields for every project. And that is just an extensible way to add different capabilities so that you can easily update pages. We use Gravity Forms for form management, and then Rank Math is our SEO plugin that we go with. We also have a internal theme that we've developed. So it's sort of like a starter template, and we turn that theme and we extend it to adapt to whatever the organization needs to do. And so we kind of start with that blank slate, and then we build that into something that is going to meet the needs of the organization. And then last thing is the hosting, which we go with Flywheel because Flywheel has a really good support and it has automated backups, and it just makes maintenance much easier compared to other options.
It's interesting to see this tech stack because there's a lot of known players that I am quite familiar with and I use myself. I'm curious about ClickUp though. Is that kind of like I didn't follow it exactly. It's a communication tool like Slack or Teams?
It has that kind of component, but it's more of a project management application where it's sort of like Notion, if you're familiar with Notion, but it's like this, you can do anything with it. It's highly extensible. It's incredibly overwhelming and complicated. And I probably am only using 10% of the capabilities, but it's helped us stay organized a lot, especially because there's so many different phases to the website. It's really, really nice, especially for these projects that have repeated tasks and like the checklist that you always need to follow. And a lot of times they're complicated and they need to be in a particular order. And it's also really good for things like, tracking your to-do list. So things that we still need to implement on the website or any bugs that come through. It's really simple to just see it all in one place and get to work.
Oh, so it sounds something more like a Trello or Asana.
It's kind of weird. It's sort of like that all mixed together. So they have a Trello board view and you can use it that way. They have lists, which I think that's how That's kind of what Asana is. It's like a great list program. Is that right?
It's a project management tool that's a bit more task oriented versus Trello, which is more card based.
Okay. It has those two elements. And one of the things with ClickUp is that you can change your views. So you can have like a task list of things to do, but then you can turn it into the Trello board, or you can turn it into a calendar if there are dates attached to it, or you can turn it into another view. And it's very dynamic, and you can look at data in the same data in different ways. And we found it's really helpful just because my wife, she's the right brain. She's very creative and she likes to see things in a particular way. And then I'm more of like the Trello Kanban board, and I can also see it in that way. And it's very helpful for us to be able to approach the same task list, but have different views for it.
And I imagine you guys went through some kind of app selection process where you've tried a few. I mean, even going back to ConvertKit, for example, you've tried MailChimp, you tried Constant Contact, it landed on ConvertKit. So I imagine that all of these are kind of tried and tested and they work for you, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. ConvertKit we've been with for about a year, probably. And like MailChimp did a lot of good stuff, and it's great for, I think, most applications. It's just with ConvertKit, it allows you to do a few more advanced things, and you can get a little bit, do kind of some more advanced like automation that allows us to approach our marketing in a more constructive way that kind of helps us not have to worry so much about our newsletter, but still have it operating in the background and keeping our list alive.
One of the things I love about technology is that it keeps on evolving because MailChimp was the king not so long ago. I don't know exactly how old ConvertKit is, but it seems to be the most popular one these days. The new cool kid in town. And if I heard correctly, you built your own WordPress theme because that's pretty cool. I mean, as a user of WordPress myself, I tend to go to the various theme forest theme, I forget the name, to purchase a professional theme. But you guys have already built yours in-house that's extensible. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, we're really happy with how that turned out. And it's helpful because we've been able to identify like the different pieces that nonprofits typically use with their website. And it's like we have this starting point, and it's really easy to begin with like that feature set. So we have all the building blocks, and then we can convert that into something that has a particular brand or a particular vibe and matches the organization that we're working for. And it's really like a mix and match process, but it's simplified the work on our end significantly, and it leads to a much better website in the end because it's made tailored explicitly for the organization that we're working with.
It must also be able to allow you to produce faster results because you know the theme inside and out. You can make changes to it as needed versus buying various themes and then learning how this particular theme works and how it doesn't work sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the, like, we love working with WordPress, but that is the major drawback, is that it's sort of like a wide open field. You can do anything in WordPress, and great power comes great responsibility. And you can work with a theme that is completely different than any other theme that you've worked with before. So having that continuity is really valuable. And it also helps us continually refine the process because as we're interacting with an organization and they give us a little bit of feedback, it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of a sore point. So we're going to, figure out a way around that. We're going to fix it so that it isn't a problem for any other organization moving forward.
For the Gravity Forms, which is a plugin for WordPress, I don't know, maybe you can tell me, does that have the capability of providing the nonprofit to request either volunteers or donations?
Yes. Yeah. So it's good for something like a volunteer form. It's a visual drag and drop form builder, but it's one that is very easy for a software developer to work with. So it's very extensible in terms of the things that I can do on my end, but it's also really easy for the client, for the nonprofit, to be able to just jump in there, make a new form, and hit publish and don't have to worry about anything else. The thing with the donation form is you could do something like that with Gravity Forms, and it does have payment processors built in, but it'd probably be easier to work with something that's more off the shelf. So either, an organization's existing CRM, or one of the plugins that does specifically work with donations in particular. So there's a couple that are tailored to nonprofits for the donation form, and they use Stripe, and they're streamlined, they work well. And those are just a little bit more optimized for donations specifically.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious then, what is in your future? Where do you see Pixel Lighthouse in the few years?
Yeah, this is top of mind because, we're in planning mode as the year wraps up. And I think for 2023, our goal is going to be really, extend what's already working for us and then try to take it a little bit further. So, number one is our marketing. So we've gotten a lot of traction with organizations on LinkedIn, and I'm going to continue to publish content there. But we also want to expand our focus from just written content and start moving more into webinars, appearing on more podcasts. And we've also thrown around the idea of possibly starting our own podcast. I probably need to pick your brain a little bit on that, Alex. But
with pleasure.
Yeah, we'll see kind of where we land with that. The other thing is we're talking about potentially adding some additional services on top of what we currently offer. So like right now, we do the branding and the website build, but we don't do a lot of ongoing work beyond some of the maintenance. So one thing that we're thinking about, and a lot of our clients have asked about, is for some continual, like ongoing arrangement to improve the website. And so like what we're doing is we're looking into possibly looking for traffic issues and, incorporating fixes for that. And then also possibly some A/B testing that we might want to offer. But it's sort of like, we're trying to figure out how that would work with our current process and make sure that it's not going to complicate something that's already fairly complicated, and it's going to be sustainable and also help clients continue to improve their website and reach more people.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in there, but it would be my pleasure to help you with a podcast. Just to let you know, just to give you a little nugget, the way that I got started was I joined a 5-day podcast challenge. And it's really meant to give you the quick and dirty of how to get up and running. And then you just build the plane as you go. But we'll talk more about that offline.
Sounds good.
Austin, this has been great. Where can people find more about you online?
There are 2 ways. So I'm active on LinkedIn, where I share 3 bite-sized tips every week on how to improve your nonprofit's website and your messaging and your brand. So you can just search Austin Hattox, and that's with 2 T's, not D's. And I think I'm the only person with that name, so I should pop up. Or I also have a free guide for your listeners on how to make the perfect nonprofit homepage, which you can access by going to pixellighthouse.com/agents.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put those links at the bottom in the show notes. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today.
I really appreciate it, Alex.
All right, then. That's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me in the next Agents of Nonprofit.